Well, it's great to be here. I can't believe it's been 6 years. I came 4 times, or 3 times in 4 years, but I don't know, been going other places. It's great to be back. I love Edinburgh. It's my favorite place to come. I'm not saying that just because I'm here. Glasgow's fine too, but you know, what can I say? And it's been a great experience. One of my sort of things I just wanted to do someday, I don't know why, I can't explain it. I just wanted to write up Arthur's Seat.
Yeah.
I saw it, plus, you know, the whole James Hutton and geology and all that kind of stuff. So I got to do it today. It was raining a little bit, and I kind of got lost. I'm going down this one road, I keep going and going, and this is not heading anywhere towards where I started, but so that's why it ended up being a rather long run, because I was running the wrong way. Anyway, now Ben said we're going to have a Bible class tonight. Tonight's not really going to be a Bible class. I'm going to be doing more Christian apologetics kind of stuff. So tonight, Christian apologetics. Tomorrow, hopefully an encouraging lesson, and then a practical lesson. A little apologetics, a little preaching, a little practical Christianity.
Yeah.
Kind of sprinkle it all in there. So the topic tonight is finding truth, essentially. And what it's really about is Christian worldview, or about worldview in general. All right, so there's a famous scene there where Jesus is saying that, I am truth, and Pontius Pilate said, "What is truth?" That's everybody wants to know that. What is truth? And there's a battle, intellectual battle going on there, and I kind of look at what goes on the universities, and there's this atmosphere that somehow has been created, I think in Europe to a very large extent, in America as well, that somehow Christianity is outmoded, it's sort of like outdated, for people who don't really think for themselves, and yet so many of the things that our cultures value came from Christianity. They've been hijacked in a sense from Christianity. And I think that we as Christians have become intimidated by philosophers and all kinds of people. And I think we've given up what I call the intellectual high ground. Certainly in America, I believe that those who speak for what I believe is truth in America, first of all, they wouldn't get hired. And if they were hired and then they started talking that way, they'd probably get fired. And I think those who speak for atheism and postmodernism and pluralism have drowned out the truth. And I want to challenge you with the thought that we need to talk just a little bit louder. Not obnoxiously, not rudely, but we have a little bit of advantage in all these discussions. I believe we happen to be right and they're wrong. There's an advantage there. Now I'm going to talk about worldview in a broader sense. I'll talk about pantheism and dualism, but I'm not going to principally focus in on that. I had about 60 slides I took out of this presentation this morning, where I was going to talk about Buddhism and Hinduism and Jaina and Baha'i and all these other things. And so I decided, well, that's a little bit too much. Do you want to think on world religions? I've got a whole 15-hour set over there, world religion, pick it up. So I'm going to principally talk about the Christian worldview as opposed to the 2 primary worldviews that are presented at the universities. And those are naturalism, scientific materialism, and postmodernism. I was reading a book by a guy, Dallas McCown. He's an evolutionist and an atheist. And to me, his statement represents kind of the typical attitude that I see. He said, Christianity is scientifically supported, probably insupportable, philosophically suspect at best, disreputable at worst, and historically fraudulent. That's the typical attitude. People say that, obviously. Obviously, everybody knows that. And I say, oh, really? Okay, I did a class at King's College in London answering that first question. I'll just give an example of kind of the attitude there. I might have used this illustration before, I don't know, but I was in a van a few years ago, a bunch of science professors going to a conference, and this one lady's book was Christianity. stupid religion, you know? I don't know anybody could believe that nonsense. It said, in the Old Testament it says, if somebody wears two materials, capital punishment. What a stupid. And I said, excuse me, but the Bible doesn't say that. She said, oh yes it does. I saw it on the website. Guess where she didn't see it? So I said to her, you know, people say the Bible has all these science errors. I've read it through at least half a dozen times. I haven't found one. I don't know what they're talking about. Got really quiet in that van, can you imagine? Because she spoke assuming that everybody in the car like, yeah, duh. And I said, and then I opened up my Bible. Now, could you find that one in Leviticus, the one about clothing with two colors, with two materials? Yeah. Now, I didn't remember chapter and verse. I just knew it was on the right-hand side of the page somewhere in Leviticus. Flipped through real quick, I found it, and I read the scripture. And I said, see, it doesn't say that. Now, I don't know why people say that kind of stuff. Then it got really quiet, then we changed the subject. But now, we're going to focus in on the second point, but let me just mention the third point, historically fraudulent. Right? Myths and fables. Again, my response to that is, which ones? Which ones? I mean, which historical errors are you talking about? Because I don't know many. I do know there are things mentioned in the Bible that aren't confirmed from other sources. There's all kinds of stuff. But to the extent that the Bible can be checked against historical sources, the Bible, I believe, is by far, there's no close second, the most accurate and reliable historical source we have in the ancient world. And I'd say that with confidence. I mean, I'm not a professional historian, but I'm going to talk about this philosophically suspect at best is reputable at worst. So I want to kind of bring into court, if you will, postmodernism, atheism. Atheism is not a philosophy. We'll say materialism or determinism, and Christian philosophy. And so that's kind of like what I do. I want to talk about worldview. I think that we as followers of God need to think in terms of worldview more as we're sharing our faith than we were in the past. Because we live in the post-Christian age, especially in Europe. Oh my goodness gracious. And so we're going to meet people who say, yeah, well, what about it? What it says here in Matthew or whatever? And we must be talking about fairies and ghosts or whatever. And so I think we need to begin to confront these other philosophies from the worldview perspective. Now, hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about as I go through this lesson. Perspective one uses to process and interpret information received about the world. That's my definition. All right, that's better than this other one. Just kidding. I like James Sires actually. Worldview is the set of presuppositions which we hold about the basic makeup of our world. So the materialist says this is reality. This is what's true, essentially. The postmodernist, the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Muslim, the Christian. And so I want to talk about who's right. We need to be aware of these other worldviews and be able to discuss things with people on a worldview basis, as Paul does in Acts 17. We'll see that in a few slides. Now, this is my outline. This is my outline which for what would be a good worldview. First of all, it would have to be true. In other words, if your worldview was wrong, that's kind of problematic to me. So if your basic working model to explain reality is wrong, that's going to mess you up. Because if you reason from a false assumption, everything's sort of screwed up. So I'm going to talk about the Christian worldview and other worldviews from the perspective of whether they're true or not. In other words, whether they agree with the things we know to be true. Number two, does it successfully answer the questions that people actually care about? The questions that humans ask. Those basic questions. What am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's right? What's wrong? Those questions. And number three, does those who ascribe to it, can we reasonably conclude they'd be a better human being than they would have been if they had ascribed to another worldview? You say, well, isn't that kind of subjective? I guess. But I believe you could put an atheist, an agnostic, a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, whatever, a postmodernist, you lock them in a room and say you can't come out until you come up with a list of 5 things that would define what a good person is. I believe that would be a simple task. Pretty simple. I think they'd come to consensus fairly quickly. And so we could simply ask, reasonably, based on if this is your worldview, would this create those qualities? Can we expect that? And on all three of these, Christianity totally, slam dunks these other worldviews. That people are like, ha 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 ha, Christianity. Really? So I'm going to use this as the basis to kind of talk about these different worldviews. So this is point number 2, the questions that we really care about. Okay? So what am I? What am I? What happens when we die? What's our purpose, if any? What's my value? How do I know what's right and wrong? What's the nature of fundamental reality? These are the questions people care about. All right, so first I'm about naturalism, scientific materialism, determinism. Determinism is not exactly the same as materialism. By the way, materialism is not greed. Materialism is the belief, well, I'll give you the definition here, the belief that only physical things are real. All right? So here's your definition. The belief that the only reliable or valuable instrument for deciding what is true, because that is the topic, or the value of anything, is through scientific measurement or scientific measurements or things that you can actually measure. Now, there's some problems with this worldview, because if that's true, then there's no basis for morality. What's supernatural is clearly not real, and really then there's no such thing as truth, not really. There's all kinds of problems. I'll get back to these as I go through. So a couple of statements of materialists. I think they're a pretty good summary. We exist as material beings in a material world, all of whose phenomena are the consequence of material relations among material entities. There's a lot of people who think that the only things that are real are things that you can measure and touch and see. In a word, the public needs to accept materialism, which means they must put God in the trash can of history where such myths belong. Richard Lawton. I was listening to a thing from the BBC a few years ago, and it's kind of the sort of the format was smart people on trial, essentially. I don't remember the name of the show. And so they had a theist on there and an atheist guy. The atheist got up there. He was so arrogant. I'm sorry, he just was. He was so sure, And so the opening question, he made the point in his opening statement that the only things that are real are things that can be measured. So they said to the guy, well, how do you know that? He said, these other religions, the fundamentalists and the crusades, blah, blah, blah. Didn't answer the question. They said, excuse me, we asked you a question. How do you know that? Blah, blah, blah. These people over here, those people, blah, 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 blah. And see, he's used to just bowling people over. And they said, the format of this is, we ask the questions, you answer the question. If you're not going to answer the question, we'll just bring the next person up here. So I want to know this, we want to know this, how do you know that the only things that are real are things that are physical? And he said, I guess I just believe. Well, that's a real strong argument. And my question is it even true? Is it even true? And does the reality that we experience as human beings agree with that statement, that those are the only real things? I say no, but I want to talk about why I say no. Here's a more famous guy, his take on the whole thing. You know about him, right? Yeah. In the universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, you won't find any rhyme or reason, no justice. Because, see, if this philosophy is true, then justice is a meaningless word. Tell that to your teenager. Teenagers have a strong sense of justice. That's not right. There's this TV personality in San Diego, I love him. And he's kind of going against, backing up the poor guy against this. He always says, it ain't right. I agree with him. It's usually not right. It's funny, you listen to materialists, and they'll get all up in arms about that's not right. And yet, according to their philosophy, the word right versus wrong doesn't even mean anything. So they're not consistent, not even close. Of course, we're not always consistent either. So we'd have to work on that. Anyway, the universe we observe has precisely the properties you should expect if there's at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, or no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. It just is, and we dance to its music. Well, I don't know about that, but it's true. It sure is depressing. Very depressing. So this is my summary, so you understand this philosophy. Only that which can be observed and measured through the technique of the scientific method is real. Everything else is literally not real. Okay, so let's analyze that from the 3 points of view. True, answers the questions people care about, and makes us better than we otherwise would have been. And I believe gets an F on all 3. Okay? Purely mechanical terms. This is already posted on my website. Let me read this second part. Life is explained in purely mechanical terms. Phenomena such as mind and consciousness are considered nothing but epiphenomena, curious byproducts. See, according to the materialist, you say, I want to go to the store. That's a nonsense statement. Because what am I? What am I? What are you, according to the materialists? Chemicals and electrical signals that were created by just random events, you know. You don't exist. Not you as a conscious being, because consciousness is an epiphenomenon. In other words, it's not real. Alright? So let me ask a simple question. Do you have a body? Or are you a body? Everybody rational that I know says we have a body. Alright? But materialism says that's not true. It's just brain metabolism. You say to your wife or husband, I love you. You should say, I chemical you. I neurotransmitter you. Right now, neurotransmitters are being released that are causing physical impressions in my brain so that I think I love you, but love is a meaningless word. If scientific materialism is right, there's no God, no angels, devil, good, evil. There you go, no good, no evil. Imagine a world in which it's believed that there's no evil. Guess what there's going to be more of in that world? Evil. You can see, you can kind of anticipate what I'm going to say about whether this makes somebody better than the other would have been. No, obviously no life after death, no non-physical realities, no ultimate meaning, no purpose. No purpose. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you why I believe it's not true. Essentially, it's based on faith. You know, I teach intro to scientific thought, and we talk about the presuppositions of science. I think it'll come in the slide up here. Okay, yeah. These are the basic assumptions of science. The universe is ordered and essentially unchanging. It's observable and understandable, and is governed by mathematically precise laws. You know where those 3 assumptions came from? The Bible. If it were not for Christianity, there would be no science. Because before the scientific revolution, the general assumption of all people was that the world was chaotic and governed by forces that were not understandable and certainly not predictable. But there were some philosophers in the late Middle Ages before the Renaissance who said, well, there is one unchanging God who governs the whole universe. Therefore, the universe should be unchanging and the same everywhere. And they said that God, the reason we're here is so that God could know us and we could know Him, and therefore the universe should be knowable and understandable. And God is a God of order and beauty and symmetry, so therefore it should be mathematical. All 3 of these came from a religious presupposition, and the evidence supports that they are true, but the bottom line is, if you don't have the Bible as your presupposition, then it's based on faith. Number 2, it doesn't answer any of the questions people actually care about. And I'm going to claim, and I've got a friendly audience here, so, I'm going to claim it's patently and demonstrably false. And it certainly doesn't make those who hold to it better than it would be compared to the Christian worldview. Not even worth discussing. Okay? Yeah, this is a slide about that BBC broadcast, so that's kind of a cool story, but I already mentioned that. Now, in my science class, I tell them, here are the questions that science can answer. In fact, I would claim the scientific approach is the greatest, the most useful, reliable approach to answering these questions ever devised by human beings. If you want to know when, you know, I think science is a good place to start. And, for example, the Bible is a book about God, not about science, and so the Bible is probably not the first place to go to ask the age of the universe, of the earth. Probably not. That's not really the purpose of it. What, where, how many, by what means? Now let me ask you a question. Do you care about those questions? Do you care about where? How many? Is that what gives meaning to life? Does anybody really care about those things? Nobody cares about those things. Now, here are questions that science is absolutely useless. Why am I here? You know, what is my purpose? Maybe, according to naturalism, your purpose is to make as many copies of your DNA as possible. Now, if that's true, can you imagine what we justify? Think about it. Logically. Now, luckily, most atheists don't act the way that logically you would act if you accepted that as the purpose in life, but that's because they've hijacked the whole idea of purpose in life from Christianity in general. How valuable am I? Science says, oh, maybe 3 pounds 50. Carbon, some calcium, you know. Christianity offers a bit different answer. You are worth more than the entire world. Does God exist? Now, the materialist says we settled that question. God doesn't exist. Well, how do you know that? All right? Can belief in only natural things settle questions about the supernatural? By definition, it can't. See, atheists say, obviously we know from science that there's no such thing as the supernatural. That is an absolute nonsense statement. That is a meaningless statement. How could understanding of the natural settle a question about the supernatural? Doesn't make sense. Now, science could tell you, if that happened, that would be a miracle. I would give that to science. Science can answer questions about the natural. That doesn't answer questions. It basically says, I don't know, or no, just no. Based on what evidence? None. What evidence do they have that miracles don't happen? Well, they don't have any, of course. And supposedly they only accept things that they know from evidence, and yet they believe this thing they certainly don't know from the evidence. So how do they know it? I just know it. Well, that's really convincing. That's a great argument. But I'm telling you, it's their only argument. I have plenty of arguments for the supernatural. Absolutely. Will God answer if I pray? Do supernatural events happen? What is the right thing to do? Everybody wants to know that. Yeah. And materialism is useless. It simply has no ability to help. If materialism is right, then I don't exist, first of all. There's no soul, no spirit, no non-physical reality at all. Belief in God is just some meme. That's what Dawkins says. There's some accidental, unfortunate accident of evolution. Life has no value. Human beings have no inherent value at all. Love is, like I said, chemicals moving around the brain. The Bible says God is love. Materialism says love is a chemical. I can even tell you the name of that chemical. Religious thought is nonsense. Art, literature, music. What's music? I mean, what about art? What about beauty? Can science answer questions about that? Badly. Justice is a meaningless word. What about human rights? What would be the basis for human rights if we accept this philosophy? And by the way, where did the concept of human rights come from? The B-I-B-L-E. Certainly not from Eastern philosophy. Certainly not. Where does the idea of each individual having dignity come from? Which worldview creates that idea? We accept this as if it was obvious, but I'm telling you it's the result of the Christian worldview. If it weren't for the Christian worldview, slavery would be everywhere. That's a historical fact. Thank you, Mr. Wilberforce, and a few other people that really worked on that one. We Americans, we were way far behind this comparison. Now, there's a few reasons why I believe it's patently false. First of all, the universe was created. I could spend some time on that, but all the evidence is consistent with this one apparent fact. It's not been proved by science, but it's the only reasonable conclusion based on the evidence. There was nothing. No energy, no matter, no space, not even time. And out of absolutely nothing, the entire universe came to existence in a brilliant flash of light. All right? Easily explained by the Bible, because that's verse 1 in chapter 1 in the first book in the Bible. And if the universe was created, it proves that there's more than the universe, almost by definition. The simple fact that the universe exists proves that the naturalist view is almost certainly wrong. Because how can they explain the existence of the universe? Where did it come from? What did it come from? Now, if it came from some other physical thing, because those two things are real, well, where did that thing come from? And I'm sorry, that's an endless loop. They cannot explain the most basic thing. Another reason, and I'm not going to go into this, but I believe from what I know about life, the idea that life came about by some random chemicals bumping into each other borders on ludicrous. I mean, the amount of faith it would take to believe that, compared to faith to believe that God is in control. I mean, it takes amazing faith. And another reason is, I call it the anthropic principle, but it just so happens that every single parameter that governs how the world works, you change it, but just a tiny bit, we wouldn't be here. And for that, it's just an accident, and the probabilities, start stringing all those zeros. After you get to a couple hundred zeros, you start to think that probability is essentially equivalent to 0. And no one in their right mind can deny the existence of right and wrong. And in fact, even they say, man, it is wrong to teach religion in our schools. Well, you just made a big mistake there, but even if you don't think anything's wrong. And another reason I think science, this materialism is wrong is because the Bible is inspired by God, but that's a whole other lesson. And seriously, atheists live in this Pollyanna world. Do you even know who Pollyanna is and stuff? You know who Pollyanna is. Probably the young people don't know who Pollyanna is. That movie is 50 years old at least. But see, they don't understand that the things that we value the most, especially Western cultures, to be honest with you, are the result of Christian thinking. Not perfect Christian thinking. I mean, let's face it, people in the name of Christianity have done some incredibly stupid things. Let's just get that right out. I'm not going to deny that. But, at least if a Christian goes out and commits mass murder, at least the things they believe in tells them it's wrong. But what from this philosophy says that's wrong? What's the basis for saying anything's wrong? There's no purpose. What kind of sexual behavior is wrong? None. Just whatever. Animals, wherever you want. What says that a guy who's 40 can't have sex with somebody who's 13 years old against her will? Where in this philosophy, where in this worldview, do you have that being wrong? You think about it. Now, I'll say this. Most atheists I know behave quite ethically. The ones who are committed atheists. In fact, the committed atheists I know are cut above the average on ethics. I'm just going to be honest with you. But what they don't understand is their philosophy doesn't support that. Racism, slavery can be defended by this view, and I don't think it leads to a better world. Violence and greed are acceptable by this worldview. Justice is a meaningless word. ought and should, just drop them from our vocabulary. Sin, again, nonsense word. Sin's real. I don't know about you, but sin is real. I see people control by it. I know I'm controlled by it at times. And they just say it's not even real. Well, that really solves that problem. What about the problem of evil? It says it doesn't exist. Well, that really helps there. All right, I think I'm going on long enough. All right, no wonder intellectuals overreacted and created postmodernism instead, because modernism. I'm not going to talk. I'm only going to talk about postmodernism for 5 minutes or so. All right. Here's a kind of a summary of it. By the way, I'm going to talk about the Christian worldview. It'd get kind of depressing if I didn't talk about the Christian worldview. I've got to present something good here. Truth, if such a thing exists, is the property of culture. There's no absolute truth. All truth is relative. Truth is created by people. There is no ultimate moral authority or moral absolute. I don't know. I'd like somebody to guess what's going to happen when I let go of this thing. You don't want to guess? All right. Now, is that because we believe it's going to happen? Is that why it happens? This philosophy is nonsense. And yet, it's been the predominant philosophy in University of America anyway, in the 80s and 90s. It's starting to run out of steam. You know what I'm saying? So what's the next thing that's going to replace it? Well, how about Christian philosophy? Come on now. I hear we have somebody getting a PhD in philosophy here. Where's our philosophy student today? Uh-oh. They didn't show up tonight? No moral authority. See, in postmodernism, the hero is a bad guy. The one out there saying what we've been doing is wrong. That's a bad guy. In fact, saying something is wrong is the wrongest thing you can do. That's right. In this philosophy. Now, I was in Sweden a few years ago, and I remember I made a statement. I was going to think out of existence. Guy said, some things are just not true. I don't care what anybody says. This one woman she fell out of her chair. She was having trouble breathing afterwards. Because the only sin in Sweden is to say that that's sin. Postmodernism has had that effect. By the way, unlike naturalism, which I believe has no positive thing to offer to us at all. In my opinion, postmodernism actually has some positive. As an intellectual approach, I actually kind of like it in some ways, okay? Because postmodernism said all cultures have something to offer to humanity. I agree with that. Because really, the modernism or determinism or something materialism kind of said only the Western approach is the right one. It kind of rejected a lot. So I kind of like that. I think postmodernism does a better job of talking about history than modernism did. Also, I'll give some credit there as a intellectual approach to answering certain questions. I think postmodernism has something said for it. But as a philosophy for life, it's confusing. Basically, the worldview of postmodernism is that there is no worldview, or they're all equal, and therefore, essentially, there is none. The idea of truth has disappeared. I don't know about that. Reality is a social construction. It's true for you. It's not true for me. Meaning exists in the communities. There's 50 different Bibles. There's the Lutheran Bible. I say there's only one Bible. Whoever reads it determines the meaning of it. I don't agree with that. In fact, not only do I agree with that, I think that's ridiculous. And they would say, when the author writes something, that doesn't determine the meaning. It's the readers that determine the meaning. Of course, postmodern philosophers apply it to everything except the things they write. When they write it, then it means what they thought. But when anybody else writes anything, never mind. I'm kind of going off too far in that direction. There's no rational way to discover what's the best worldview. How about total confusion as a better worldview than the Christian worldview? Correspondence theory of truth says a statement is true if reality corresponds to that which is predicted by that statement. All right, so I predict this thing's going to fall. Okay, great. But relativism is the idea that there is no truth. It's either discovered or created. Which is it? Truth is discovered, and other it exists, and or we create it. I don't know. I like the former. It seems to work better. All right. This is all right. So let's talk about it. We've got our truth. Is it true? Is postmodernism true? All right. So the postmodernist says nothing is true. Absolutely nothing is true. Well, my question to the postmodernist is that true? That nothing is true? Absolutely! Hopefully you get the joke, okay? If you didn't get the, should I say the joke again? Absolutely nothing is true. You see, this is a circular reasoning, if there ever was one. It's a down the toilet kind of circular reasoning, in my opinion. It's my opinion, okay? Absolutely nothing is true. There's no absolute truth. Well, are you sure about that? I'm sure about that. Well, there you go. And besides, I'm sorry, but some things are just true, Either the earth exists or it doesn't. Either I am a body or I have a body. And two things that are contradictory can't both be true. It's got to be one or the other. Whoever said this was a good philosophy? Who said that? There's two possibilities. God exists or he doesn't. You know what I'm saying? The pantheist says God is the universe. The Christian says God created the universe. I'm sorry, but they can't both be true. But according to postmodernism, they're both true, or they're neither true, or it's better to be all confused and not even know which is which, and it doesn't matter if you're right, because nobody's right anyway. And the thing is, these people, and they laugh at Christianity as a foolish, outmoded philosophy. And we're intimidated. That's what drives me crazy. It drives me crazy that we Christians are intimidated on campus by these people. I really think we need to kind of talk a little louder, not obnoxiously, but I think we need to talk a little more loudly. If your culture said it was good to jump off a cliff, would you do it? Let's say we have 1,000 people that all get together and they agree that, that pain is not real. They all just, just pain is not real, all right? Fine. Let's practice your philosophy. Is it okay if I punch you in the nose? All right. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to get to the Christian worldview. This is kind of depressing. Here we go. Now, this is the Christian worldview. And the nice thing is, this is I admit I wrote this, but I think it's a summary that works pretty well. And what's interesting is, all of these things are established by the time you finish Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 1 through 3 is the most brilliant book of philosophy and theology ever written, in my opinion. Brilliant! I mean, just think about Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, what's that say? There was a beginning. All right, so Hinduism, Buddhism, Jaina, Shinto, all wrong, if that's true. Oh, wait a minute. According to what we know from science, is that a true statement? Yes, sir. Oh, okay, so great. So from the point of view of worldview, those are wrong, and so that's the first part of the outline. Now, I'm sorry to say everything about Hinduism, Buddhism, and all these religions is wrong, but put it this way, if Genesis 1:1 is right, then those people are wrong. And guess what? It's right. Okay? All right, in the beginning. All right, now, next word. In the beginning, God. That's a profound thing. In the beginning, God. God pre-existed everything. Oh yeah. In the beginning, God created. Now we've dealt with postmodernism. We've dealt with pantheism, animism, polytheism, dualism, existentialism, every ism. I guess we still have Judaism, and maybe even Islam, possibly. And we're halfway through the first verse in the Bible. That's how. Oh, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So there's a physical reality and a spiritual reality. All right. Anyway, the world is real, created, and good. Now, is everything good? That's what they say. That's what they say. It's all good, right? Well, it's not all good. They can say it all they want. It's not all good. Is everything good? No! But according to the Christian worldview, everything that was created is good. How good? Genesis chapter 1. Very good. Okay, that's the Christian worldview. Does that create philosophical problems? Yes, but they're answerable. By the time we get to the end of Genesis chapter 2, that's been answered. Right? Or Genesis 3 anyway. So I believe this philosophy answers every question and answers them very, very well. There exists a parallel unseen spiritual reality, which is not limited to or defined by physical reality. Right? That's in Genesis 1 also. The creator of both is God, who reveals himself in the Bible. All these things claim. All right. Human beings are both physical and spiritual. That's in Genesis chapter 2, actually. Although the physical world is good, evil exists. It's real. It's not an illusion like Hinduism and Buddhism says. Okay? Such evil is the result of freedom of will given to a created being and their subsequent decision to use that freedom to sin. See, according to scientific materialism, free will is that's just two words. F-R-E-E-W-I-L. Meaningless words, but it's nice. Alright? But, I don't know. I think it's real. It sure seems real. I see people making decisions all the time. Okay? So what we have here is the explanation about the physical is all good. Every single thing God created is good. So why is it evil? Because God created us. Would have been better off not creating us. Well, no, not really. Because why did he create us? Because he wanted to love us and he wanted us to love him. Can you force somebody to love you? No. So God had to give a choice. You know that garden, that tree in the garden, the one that the Elvis bush wasn't there? Why did he put that tree in there? Because he had to put that tree in there. Because if the tree wasn't in there, then Adam and Eve would have not had a choice. And if they didn't have a choice, how could they love God? Okay? You know, it's a risky thing being a parent, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I made that point when I talked about that a few years ago. All right, that's point number 5 in the outline of the Christian worldview. There's a definite right and a definite wrong for human behavior, which is determined by God. Now, everything I know, every single thing I know about reality on every level agrees with every single thing on this list. I believe it's true. And modernism and materialism does not pass the "it's true" smell test. Postmodernism is a joke, but polytheism, all these things, they just simply, literally don't agree with reality as it actually is. All right, the Christian worldview is true. In fact, the universe is real. Creation is good. Evil does exist. And I exist. And I'm not a sack of chemicals. Science and the Christian worldview do not contradict on any level. The Christian worldview answers all these questions brilliantly. Now you can argue it's wishful thinking. It sure seems that way because the answers are really good. You know what I'm saying? How did I get here? It answers that question. Why am I here? Where am I going? Why are humans able... some of these questions that are raised by science that only the Christian worldview can answer as far as I can see. Better than other religious worldviews. How is it that human beings are able to comprehend the universe? Why? How is that? Science, they just shake their head and they come up with angulating arguments. Why is there pain and suffering? Does postmodernism have an answer for that? No. Science has an answer for why there's pain. I'll give them that. I'll give them that, for sure. But why is there suffering? Why is there evil? The problem of sin, the problem of suffering, the problem of death, all of them make sense. And by the way, in the Hindu worldview, what is my purpose? My purpose is to no longer exist. Great. Now, if that's true, I guess it's just true. We have to live with it. You know what I'm saying? But, I don't know. These are some things that the world has because of science. And I'll defend this in any court. And I believe I'm just plain right. Science, first of all. Slavery would be everywhere in the world, I believe. I'm convinced of that. Civil rights, women's rights. Now, you know, you go to India, Hindu country. Who does most of the benevolent work in India? Christians. Why? Because, see, according to Hinduism, suffering is an illusion. Okay? So, that's a pretty good reason. Now, there's some nice people in India, but their philosophy says suffering is not real. Christians say suffering is real. Christians say suffering is good, but the response of Christians to suffering is compassion. Buddhism, their response to suffering is dispassion. To become uninvolved. The goal of Buddhism is to be uninvolved. No wonder Christians do most of the benevolent work in Buddhist countries. Now, I'll give this to the Muslims, because one of their pillars is almsgiving. And so most of the obvious benevolent needs are met by Muslims in Muslim countries, but they have this problem. See, for them, it is illegal and against their religious system to give to anyone who is not Muslim. Well, that's sure the opposite of the Christian worldview, wouldn't you say? Yeah. So, there you go. What about all the evil done in the name of Christianity? They say, well, what about that? Oh, so you do believe in evil then? Okay, never mind. All right? At least we have a standard. I mean, would Jesus have done those things? Almost everything that people point out that Christians have done has a simple thing. I mean, even they would agree that Jesus would not have done that. Even they would agree with it. So, there you go. So these are some worldviews. I've given a specific response to these two. Pantheism, and I wish I had time. That's the 60 slides I took out, and I should end. In the next 10 minutes or so. So, I'm not going to say that postmodernism, pantheism, animism, dualism are all wrong. You don't really defeat deism until you get to Genesis 2, in which God does actually intervene and interact in the world. So, and I believe each one of these philosophies and worldviews force you to believe something that is patently false. I would say that Hinduism answers the questions that people care about better than, say, postmodernism, that's for sure. Way better than materialism. All right, but, the question of value, besides, it's wrong. And I would say, in terms of making you a better person, I have that discussion anytime. Okay? All right, so what about this? There's lots of different ways at the same place. Really? All right, really? Jesus said, wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life. People would accuse Christians of being closed-minded. Okay? But, there's on some, I guess, I don't know about closed-minded. We have conviction. I'll give you that. We have conviction. I hope we're not closed-minded. I sure hope you're not closed-minded. Seriously. We do have convictions. We believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that He's God in the flesh, and that if we behave like Him, the world will be a better place, and so will we. And if you want to call that closed-minded, all right, fine. Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That's a pretty narrow statement, I want to say. But are you going to come to the Father? Are you going to come to God? Are you going to come to know the true Creator of the universe through dualism? I don't see how you could. So thank you, Jesus, for stating the truth. Jesus says, "I am the truth." Now the title of this talk is, "What is truth?" Jesus said, "I am the truth." That's the answer according to Jesus. The whole idea that there's 17 different ways to the same place, because first of all, they're not even going to the same place. All right? Not even going to the same place. Okay? And again, here's where I start taking out all these other worldviews in the PowerPoint. Acts 17. The reason I like Acts 17 as an example is because here Paul is doing something that you don't see done very often in the Bible, simply because normally they didn't have to do that. I mean, when Jeremiah was speaking, who was he speaking to? Jews. Same with Jesus. But here Paul is in Athens speaking to a bunch of philosophers. They're, basically Epicureans and Stoics were the main things. There might have been a few Pythagoreans out there, maybe a couple of Plato followers, but pretty much. And I like the example of what Paul does. Acts 17. John does. Because, it's one thing to be confident that the Christian worldview is the right one. It's another thing to convince other people of that, I guess that's kind of our job. And again, I believe that the Word of God creates faith. I believe that. Partly because it says in the Bible, partly because I've seen it happen many times. I've sat down with people, and isn't it an amazing privilege that you meet somebody, maybe even somebody you didn't know, and within weeks or months their life is totally turned around and going in a better direction? That's such a great, amazing privilege to be able to do. It's so amazing. We're so blessed to do that. But Acts 17, I'm going to turn there. What Paul does here is he finds a common ground, he finds a connection. And we have a connection with all these people. We have a connection with atheists, we have a connection with polytheists, and every other, we have a connection. We're children of the same God, and there's things that we understand to be true that they understand to be true as well. Alright, so let me see, verse 22 to 23. I don't have time to read the whole thing. I was reading Acts 16. They flogged him. What's that have to do with anything? Alright, good. So Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." So we got a bunch of religious people here. Well, guess what? I'm religious too. We have that in common. "For as I walked around and looked carefully at the objects of worship, I even found an altar inscribed to an unknown God. Now what you worship is something unknown, I'm going to proclaim to you." And if you read this thing, basically their concept of God was very, very distant and unknown. All right, the Epicureans had this pantheist view that God is sort of this undefinable thing that kind of is the universe. The Stoics had God being so far from human beings, he was unknowable. And then Paul says to him, "I want to tell you about a different God, a better God, because in him we live and move and have our being." And he says, God is very interested in each one of you individually. And he introduces it, and he says, this is a God who's going to call us to account someday. There's going to be a final resurrection and a judgment. He says, God proved it because he raised Jesus from the dead. He didn't mention Jesus until the end of this discussion, because he needed to find a common ground. He needed them to understand, here's how you see the universe, here's how I see the universe. And I want to tell you, the way I see the universe is just better than the way you see it. And I believe that's what it is with Christianity. You know, even if Christianity wasn't true, it should be awesome. Of course, it wouldn't fit all three categories, you know, of being a real worldview. But it'd be better on the other two counts anyway, you know what I'm saying? He quotes their philosophers. He quotes Aretas, a Stoic philosopher who said we are his offspring. But he meant we're his offspring, but he's like 27 levels away, not noble at all. Their view is God is unchanging and unaffected by us. All right? Well, you can't have a relationship with that kind of God. Paul presented a God that can be known by us. He wants to know us. And then he pointed to Jesus, and then a few were converted. Most weren't, but a few were. These were smart people. Sometimes those smart people are awfully arrogant. Okay. Now, I'm just going to give one example. So I took out all these slides, just give one example. Let's talk about the question of evil. I believe Christianity offers by far the best answer to evil. First of all, atheism says it's not real. Postmodernism says evil. Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, evil is an illusion. It's just something that appears to be real, but it's not real. That really solves that problem. Does ignoring something make it go away? Say, hey, you got cancer. Cancer? What's cancer? Well, that really helps. Okay? Islam says it's God's will. Because Islam has, if Islam agrees with free will, it's hard to find it in there. It's kind of maybe squishy, but not really. You know, you see somebody in a horrible situation, suffering, whatever. Muslims say all the time, inshallah, it's God's will. It's not God's will. If a woman gets raped, that's not God's will. That's not God's will at all. By the way, that's why we pray. You know, Matthew 6, you said, pray for God's will to be done. The reason we pray for God's will to be done is because God's will is not always done. Well, in the bigger sense it is because he gave us free will. All right? Christianity says evil exists because God loves us enough to give us a choice. I believe that's the only viable answer to the question of evil. The question of suffering, the same thing. Islam says good deeds take away evil deeds. That's the answer to evil. If you do enough good, it kind of cancels out, you know. All right, I gave, you know, a certain amount to the poor. Awesome. All right. Look at this from pornography. Is that even bad? I don't know if it is. All right. I didn't say God peace be upon him or something. I don't know, whatever it is. All right. You know, it's like this thing here. That's not a very good perspective. Salvation by your own effort, according to Surah 40, verse 9. Surah 39, 61, Surah 745. Charity pays for sins. That's works salvation. In Islam, you earn grace, you earn favor with Allah, you earn salvation, you earn paradise. All right? That's quite different from the Christian worldview. In Islam, salvation is earned through efforts of those who are pre-selected by Allah to inhabit a very central paradise. Christianity, salvation is granted by the grace of the loving God to those who, through faith and repentance and baptism, Church Christ, got to put that in there, accept that love. I don't know. To me, it's better. You know, when humans create religion, they say we find God. Right? Every human philosophy or religion that agrees in God says we find God. Oh, the only exception is Christianity and arguably Judaism, which says God finds us. I don't know. I think that's better. All right. I said enough about that. Is it a good worldview? Is it true? Well, I don't know. Is Muhammad a prophet? Because he claimed to be. How about the 700 Jews he massacred? Why? Because they wouldn't say he was, you know, better than their Bible, essentially. I guess so. That's a prophet. 15 wives. The official doctrine of the Quran, which is that whatever Allah says in a later surah cancels what was said before if they disagree. So much for the concept of inspiration. I can talk about the blatant science errors in the Quran. Does it make its followers better, this worldview? You ask, you tell me. I would give Islam credit in that it encourages prayer. That's good. It encourages knowing the one God, and they believe essentially in the same God. They're just sort of messed up on the concept of that God. Does it give equal respect to women? I kind of question that one. Does emphasis on jihad cause some issues? Okay. So, summary. Again, this is not a Bible lesson. We're here to be encouraged in your faith in terms of, all right, that'll be tomorrow, okay? So this is more like, hey, we're kind of lucky to be Christians. Praise the Lord, okay? I'm thankful that I can stand in front of these other people who think they're so smart and, not like laugh at them like some people do, but say, I'm very, very confident that what you believe does not make sense. And I hope I can help you with that. So the theologies of world religions are fundamentally opposed to one another. The whole many paths of the same thing is ludicrous. The Christian worldview is radically different from all the others. And it works on every level. It's true. It's consistent with enough reality. It answers every question that people care about in a satisfactory way. And I believe of all the worldviews, it logically makes the best person. And then it's kind of supported by a bunch of evidence as well. That's worth mentioning. So what is truth? Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and life. So why are these other worldviews wrong? Because they're wrong. Because Jesus is truth. Either Jesus is truth or he's a liar. And I don't know, it just doesn't fit that. He didn't have 15 wives and massacre 700 Jews and all that other stuff. Okay? I could mention some apologetic stuff here. Why I know Jesus is truth. You know, the miracles he worked, the fulfillment of prophecies. I gave a lesson on that a couple days ago in London. It's on my website. Listen to that when you have some time tomorrow. All right, so that's what I have to say tonight. I'll see you tomorrow morning early. Living by faith, I think you're going to be really encouraged by that lesson.